like we're still waiting on Randy and Sharon, but this is pretty important. So if you don't mind, I can moderate.
All right,
If that's okay with you. It's a workshop. Just a reminder that because this is a workshop, there is no public comment during this meeting. There won't be any voting or decisions made. This is strict discussion topic on.
You say there is no public comment?
No, it's a workshop. It's not it's at these meetings. So present we have John Grega is online. Peggy is here in person. Martin's here, Phil's here, and Alan is here. And me, Laura. And Tony Pierce is also in our audience as well. So I guess if we could just stand to do the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, so in addition to the O&M agreement that's in the agenda, there was a memorandum from Tony that was handed out. It's dated today, and there was also an attachment with that, a PowerPoint from February for the Sunshine Law, the presentation that he had done for us earlier. So it's not in the pack, but it was handed out online. And Georgia, if you haven't already, can you please send that to John? So I guess I'll let you guys, where do you want to start? What would you like?
Well, it makes sense to me. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, make sure your buttons are popped out.
My button is popped out. This is Peggy. It makes sense to me that we maybe start with the structure options. That was until I got the memorandum that Tony did. So it might be sensible for us to first go through the memorandum and talk about the aspects that I thought with it.
No.
You can go ahead. I'm just gonna
Oh,
name it
okay.
in the folder so I can pull it
All
up
right.
on the screen.
So the memorandum doesn't really give us any new great insights. Thanks, Tony, for doing. The thing that I found interesting is that, you know, it makes very clear that the subcommittee are under sunshine and however, there has been some activity within the subcommittee that they were trying to make things work from an efficiency standpoint, and I know that they had done doing what I believe was called a survey, fact-finding about discussion. And Tony has come out with a statement that says that district staff does not encourage such purely fact-finding or members of a subcommittee wish to engage
purely fact-finding site surveys. Prior approval needs to be obtained from the district manager and district council.
All right, sorry, we gotta make a little change with the microphones. There's an area mic sitting over here. Apparently these are cutting in and out, so if you can make sure you speak up. It picks up well, but it's sitting right here.
All right, well, generally, I think most people have the memorandum in front of them, and I was just reading that the statement that sticks out to me is that while the site survey that the landscape group did seem to work adequately for them, it does not seem like that is a truly viable option if we have to get council approval and for every outing that a subcommittee wants to take. Thoughts?
I was agreeing, I think. If we can work out a way to not have to do that, it would be very good.
Yeah. But Tony, your statement is that without your approval and the district manager, subcommittees are not going to be allowed.
If I may?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, wait, can we?
He can, he is counsel.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's,
it's not public comment.
that's a recommendation, only because I think it's a good refresher each and every time. For example, before the landscape subcommittee went out, we had a very good meeting with the subcommittee chair and Mr. Gepper, and Jennifer was there, I think, and Faye was there also. Nancy was there, excuse me. Nancy, I'm sorry. Sorry. And that's why I think it's important to have that each time. So, because the opportunity to kind of go astray, human nature. So it's not, that's not something cast in law, but it's a strong recommendation that occur. And again, it can just be a simple, let's have a call, let's have a refresher as to what can occur and what should not take place. Because my understanding was it was very successful. The guidelines that we recommended were followed. And it worked out well, is my understanding.
So it's a refresher, not a permission.
Well, I guess only the board can say that's our recommendation is that, check with us first. That here's what we want to do. We want to have this fact finding. And so we can just say, again, remember, these are the parameters, these are the criteria. Just so no one goes astray. Because again, people tend to forget. I mean, we all do.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Tony,
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
and where did the information come from that it was working successfully?
My understanding was that Mr. Gephardt indicated that, and I didn't talk to Mark, but I think Mr. Gephardt indicated it was successful.
I don't believe that.
Laura, can I respond?
It's not really,
I can,
Well, it wasn't me alone, so I wanted.
right. I had understood from several people that it worked. It was kludgy, but it worked.
yeah, that was what my understanding was as well.
But it certainly falls into question the efficacy of such an approach. I mean, you're not gaining any real efficacies. If every time you do something like this, you have to have a council update and permission. So that concerns me. So that, just as long as we've got that in our heads as we move forward with the discussion, then I think. Marty, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd like to ask a question about this session. Do the rules say that we can't have public comment?
Correct. All workshops are there. Same with the our board of supervisors. Anything that is not a regular meeting does not have public comment. All workshops, because there's no voting or decisions that can be made, there's no public comment. But it's the same for the board of supervisors. It's not just because it's you guys.
We're just having a witness.
We're just having a discussion.
Yeah.
So how do we hear about all the options?
Yes, exactly.
We have our sheet here that's in front of us, that's part of your packet.
And then explain it very much.
No,
There's not.
but Laura, can you add clarity if we have it on the option, structure option sheet that you're going to be working from?
I'm not sure where this came from.
I believe it came from Nancy.
Well,
No,
no, this
No.
looks, no.
it did. It came from Nancy.
It started with Nancy and then.
Let me,
I was gonna say, I think it was Chelsea.
Hi, Chelsea.
can you hear me?
Yes,
Nancy and the Pelican Preserve Community Association provided this as the options. And everything on the option, the first three columns are exactly as they provided it. The only thing that we did was add an additional column at the end for staff input.
Chelsea, can I ask why you didn't respond to options 2 and 3 and 4 with any staff input? Just because you don't think they're as viable, or?
I didn't think it was worth a while, truthfully.
Oh,
Worth
well,
it while.
that's honest, I appreciate that.
Do we know an option 1? Which is the BPCA's preferred plan? If the subcommittees, well, let's start off with, from Tony's perspective, would it be permissible to move the subcommittees and to make them PPCA committees or work groups? Would that be permissible?
May I approach?
If it's determined that the course of conduct would be for the PPCA to have subcommittees and PPAC not to have subcommittees, that'd be probably require a change in the structure of the agreement, but it's permissible. But the question becomes, and this is guidance that PPCA needs to get from their council, whether or not those subcommittees will still be subject to the sunshine law. Because there are attorney general's opinions out there that say when a nonprofit, a private organization, such as PPCA receives or is delegated a portion of the governmental entity's authority and discretion, that entity, to the extent it's engaging in that activity on behalf of the governmental body, is subject to the sunshine law. So there's a couple of attorney general's opinions out there. I've provided them to Mr. Damsick. I don't give guidance or opinions to Pelican Reserve Community Association. That legal guidance would have to come from them. But if my recommendation, we've had discussions, the staff, that if there was to be a structure where the subcommittees would be under PPCA, then the agreement would need to have additional language in there to ensure that PPCA acknowledges that if applicable, they and their organization need to comply with the sunshine law. Just to try to tell from the district's perspective that here, here's what the attorney general has said, your attorney may disagree. Just make sure you're all abiding by the rules.
My understanding is that Mr. Medanchik thinks we can at least avoid some of the sunshine law rules.
We mean being PPCA.
Hmm?
We mean PPCA, not being PPAC.
The PPCA.
Yes,
that's right.
that's what make sure when
If-
we're talking to we, that it's
If
the other we.
if those committees, the PPCA, if those committees were committees of the PPCA.
He has not shared that with me. I understand that is his opinion.
Mhm.
I've not seen anything in writing, and again, he's not shared that with me.
So it appears to me what you're saying is, if the subcommittees report to the PPCA, they might not avoid sunshine law requirements.
Again, there's a school of thought, based on this attorney general's opinion, that they may still be subject to the sunshine law. That's all. And again,
So therefore-
well, and again, the question becomes, what is the structure? If the district appoints PPCA, I would say, yes, it is definitely a district entity. If it's the Pelican Reserve Community Association establishes and appoints the subcommittee, then it gets into the area of it's fully within that organization. But again, the attorney general's opinion, and do I agree with all attorney general's opinions? No. Okay.
State.
State of Florida. Do I agree with all the opinions that have been issued by the Florida Attorney General? No. Are they binding on the courts? No. They're persuasive or informative, as the courts indicate. And I've seen some opinions where the courts have said, that's another nice opinion. But some will say it's persuasive, helps us, it's informative, but we're not bound by those opinions.
Well, I guess the further question then might be, if the PPCA appoints these subcommittees or work groups, whatever we're going to call them, can they then provide advice or counsel, I don't know what we would call it at that point, to the PPAC itself?
Question I had as well.
Yeah.
So
I
would
think-
would anything they say be binding, or would it just be, oh, this is what PPCA would like, and then we do what we want?
Can I chime in on this one?
Yeah,
So I want to be clear, because the district's agreement for the O and M stops at the community association. How they function and operate based on the O and M agreement and what GSCDD assets are labeled in that O and M agreement, that's on the community association. That's means and methods on how to handle that. So a subcommittee under the community association, or even KW, our agreement stops with the community association.
So in essence, what I'm hearing then, Chelsea, is basically
Yes.
PPAC would just be a functioning body with no authority.
and what I'm hearing, I mean, couldn't PPAC be a functioning body that provides advice as it does now to the GSCDD board?
On what? There'd be no assets that we would have ownership for. Per se.
Well, I think there would be a need for us to have, there would be some assets that we would probably need to have ownership for.
If the O and M agreement is gonna encompass irrigation, safety, security, landscaping. And the ponds. That's it.
Doesn't be much.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really see much function for a committee like this if we aren't going to be adding value.
So let me expound on that one. Because in the O and M agreement, just like with Stony Brook, there's a threshold limitation, just like with Laura and myself, we can only approve up to $30,000. In the O and M, as it sits right now, community association, I think, only has up to, I think, $10,000 for authority. So anything above that threshold would have to come to the district in some form or fashion. If that's through PPAC, or if that's through the board, or even internally with staff, there would be a checks and balances.
Okay.
So yes, and so it sounds like there would be a need for VPAC.
Or there would be a need to have a conduit to get anything over 30,000. I wouldn't say it needs to be feedback.
Well, no, or I said a VPAC, maybe something else.
Have we heard any input from all the subcommittees? What they want to do?
Well, I don't know that we have, but it would seem obvious to me that the subcommittees would like to be able to function.
Is it because they can't coordinate their meetings effectively?
I think it's more that they're used to doing a collaborative approach to how they're going to, pick their projects. What's the next, target? How do we want to approach it? And if you can't meet to talk with your collaborators on your subcommittee, then.
Don't they just have to do that in a meeting has a quorum and?
Right, okay, so let me give you an example. So when Doug and I worked together on the ponds group, we would have lengthy conversations about, okay, so we want to do something with our aeration. We want to be able to do this and that and the other thing. And we would kind of scope out between the two of us, how we wanted to approach it. We would engage with the vendor to say, is this even feasible? And then we would come back and we would say, here is a recommendation that we would like to move forward with. Now, all of that could happen in a meeting, but where between him and I and the vendor, it might take 2 months. It would probably take 6 to 8 months to do it otherwise. And it's just is that transparency versus efficiency? I mean, that's really what we're talking. And when you've got a bunch of volunteers, the tolerance for inefficiency is low, as our board members can probably. So I would think that they're less inclined to see a lot of bureaucracy. That's my opinion.
Maybe just make one suggestion, see if whether or not you guys agree to it. First option is PPAC remains as is, subcommittees come under PPCA. Maybe we could go to the red things and go through each one as to the benefits or the or negatives to them. And because I see some of both in there. And I do have some questions about a couple of them. For instance, if we start off, is that okay with her?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or what? All right, potentially increased admin fees. That would be for the PPCA, I assume. And then, Laura, does that mean then whatever those fees are already under the CDD, that they would be decreased? If they're increased on the other side, would they be decreased on your side?
That would make sense if that's what would happen. Yes, we'd have to evaluate if and what moves over. So there'll be more of my time too, because if there's more invoices to go through, that's gonna take me more time every month to reconcile everything as well. But you wouldn't have, you would have less staff time because we wouldn't be involved except for on like a consulting basis.
So you're seeing this as a positive or negative from your side?
For me personally, it's a wash. It's actually a little more work for me if we go that route.
But if it's a wash as far as money is concerned.
I didn't run the numbers, so I can't say for sure. And I don't know how much the fee would increase on KW's part, and I didn't calculate how much that would go down. So I don't know.
All right. So the second one is little control of work or outcome. Is that little control by the CDD or is that a little control by who? I don't quite understand it. Who doesn't have the control of the outcome?
Chelsea, I didn't do these.
Chelsea there?
Yep, I'm here, sorry. So right now, all of the entities, the subcommittees and PPAC, they all answer to the board. Which I thought we had updated this since you have input and say, whereas again, if the subcommittees turn over to the community association, again, how things get done is determined by the community association based on the O&M. So right now where you have that control of the outcome and the say, if that were turned over and the subcommittees report up to whoever they determine, if it's Jen or if it's their master board, that's on them.
But so you're saying the little control, the work and the outcome then is by the CDD.
And actually the work groups. Because they're only able to make suggestions. So it would depend on how they choose to handle it underneath the PPCA.
Well, they do that to PPAC too, so. All right. I don't know if I still have my answer to that one, but increased responsibility of O&M agreement.
So again, if these subcommittees function under the community association, there would be increased responsibilities to the O&M agreement.
That would be negotiated by the district and by the PPCA.
Yes.
So we don't know what those would be at this time until such time as that decision is made.
Correct.
And I thought this is having, and not to throw one under the bus, that she was thinking that the O&M agreement going away was a better approach.
Well, it can't go away.
Not go away,
It
but
can't go away.
the workload itself was,
The only way that the workload for the O&M agreement would go away is if you don't move under PPCA. Because then all the bills and everything would be handled here at the district, and she wouldn't have that responsibility, so that responsibility would shift to the district.
okay.
So if we kept things the way they are and move forward with the budget the way that it's proposed for next year, that would be considerably less work for Jen and her staff.
All right, and the fourth one is need to increase spending threshold to $10,000. And that's for who?
I believe it's $5,000 right now, so we were looking to increase it to 10. Or that would be that was under the O&M agreement. I think, Jen, you only have a $5,000 limit right now, so we'd have to increase it to 10.
Is there any reason why we couldn't do that, given any scenario?
Well, it's part of the O&M agreement, so the O&M agreement would have to be revised. So yes.
So this is given the work groups more latitude, you're saying?
Mm,
It's giving.
more
the
latitude
community-
as far as what?
Well, you're increasing $10,000, so that means that they've got projects.
No, it gives the
they can do.
community association the
Yeah, but they
$10,000.
answer to the community association.
They would if you went that route.
Yeah. Well, that's the one we're on right now. If they come underneath PPCA. That's,
Right,
that's,
but right now, because of the way they operate at their meetings, if they want to do something, they actually have a $30,000 threshold, because that's what I have. So.
Okay.
So it'd actually decrease it by $20,000.
It would decrease it by 20.
Correct.
But if we change the O&M agreement, it could be less for 30,000.
No, it won't go to 30,000. That's my approval on it.
You say it won't go, but if
No.
we change the O&M agreement, couldn't
You
it?
could, but I can't see that happening. I don't know why we would give them the same authority as what Chelsea and I have, so.
I guess I don't know why not.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
I would not be comfortable with that. Seeing the stuff that comes through, I would not be comfortable with something like that. Because there's a lot of stuff that could get done for $30,000 on district assets that staff should be involved in at some point. They're still our stuff. It's still district assets. And I think $30,000 is too high without any oversight.
So that's just your opinion.
I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that feels that.
Hmm?
I support Laura with that because there are requirements. There's often, hey, if we issue this PO now and we'll issue another one in 2 weeks and then it exceeds that threshold. Whereas again, we go back to the district has stricter guidelines and rules and policies and procedures for procurement than most other entities. So I support Laura in keeping it at 10,000. We could try it for a year. And we could always, increase it at a later date. But right now, going from the 5K currently that Jen has the authority of to 10K, I think is a good compromise. But given the opportunity to expand if needed further on.
Sure, and I think, Jen, kind of putting you on the spot, but the majority of your stuff is under 10,000. It's more than, there's been things that have been more than 5, but they've been less than 10. So that would cover her.
Maybe I've got the designations incorrect here, but you keep saying it's district assets, but yet it's Pelican Preserve tax money.
Correct, but they're still district assets. So
Yeah.
you're the
But it's
oversight.
the residents' money.
It is the residents' money, but so is the 001 fund, so you're paying in to maintain district assets. So they're still district assets, just like the people in the general fund side pay in to maintain district assets. Yours is a little different because you only pay in to maintain the things that are inside of Pelican Preserve, where the general fund side of it pays for all of the rest of Gateway, so it's the same thing.
All right, well, it's nothing I guess we need to argue about, but the fifth one, it says less district staff time. You're saying the staff time would be less, but your time would be more?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a lot more, but I think it will be more, but you won't have the public works support, you won't have the landscaping, none of that would be there, so the rest of the staff, it would pretty much just be me and Julie. Well, me and a little bit, of Julie, and some Chelsea.
All of the subcommittees have George's time with helping putting together the schedule. We have to attend those subcommittee meetings right now. So all of that has increased over the last year. And if the subcommittees moved under the community association, staff would not attend those subcommittee meetings.
So with the exception of processing any invoices or items that we would have to take to the board for some reason, it's pretty much just me and Chelsea that would have time left. Or if there's a large project that you would want to do that we may have to get the public works director involved with, but.
I was gonna say, why would suddenly we not have access to public works support if they're your assets?
Everything would be oversight by KW the way you're going, so. If you take that route. They would take on the oversight, and then if there was a large project, they would get public works involved, but as far as like the day-to-day stuff where Andrew's been very involved with that would always happen.
The difference, here's the big difference. Right now, the subcommittees have direct contact with our public works director, with Laura, with myself. If the subcommittees moved under the community association, and for now, let's just use Jen as the hypothetical. If Jen was their point person and they all reported to Jen would be our point person to deal with in the event that they had larger projects, similar to like we do right now. If the Cypress Grove streetlight, originally Jen had taken on that project. And so we have been, if there are issues, or the generator project, if there are issues, we work directly with Jen instead of the subcommittee as a whole.
So basically, all of the things that you currently come to staff for would go to PW. With the exception of large projects where you would still go to, and then Jen would work with our staff. Me still.
And I could work with Andrew.
You would work with Andrew on the bigger stuff, yeah. But the day-to-day things like now with those lighting projects, we would not be involved at all. That would be, anything under your threshold is all you, so staff would not be involved unless it's a large project.
All right, the last one is continuity of item between PPCA and the district. What do you mean items?
So as an example, taking the landscaping that we're trying to work through with the different entities, albeit the HOA or the community association, there's been a sense of wanting continuity between the community association properties, items, assets, and the district. That way it doesn't look hodgepodge together. And by having, go ahead.
No, it's you. If somebody just
Oh,
coughed.
Oh, okay. By having those three subcommittees function underneath the community association, they would have a continuity of operations between the community association and GSCDD assets.
Makes sense.
Well, but it should be that way now. Well, not PPCA, but anyway, does the rest of the committee here, do you have any questions about what we just went through?
Well, again, one of the big questions I have is the O&M is at the the Board of Supervisors has to say that's how they want to approach support. Do we have any kind of guarantees that the Board of Supervisors would want to have an O&M agreement, or would they just say we're taking everything in-house and you guys, we'll just do it with our staff?
That I can't answer. I'm not sure. Right now, the board is waiting to get something from you guys. So they're looking for input from you as far as where you see this going, what the preference for PPAC is and the subcommittees. And then based on that, they'll have discussion and then we'll have to update the O&M agreement accordingly. And ultimately, the agreement is between the board and PPCA, but because you guys are PPAC, it's your community, they're your residents, you guys are very involved. They very much look towards and what you're gonna recommend.
So if we did a recommendation and it came under this option, then we would have to say something that it would include a stringent O&M detailing the activity that was gonna go.
Yeah, I mean, if there's certain things that you want to make sure happen or things that you want, I mean, the where it gets kind of gray is that we don't have the authority to tell PPCA how to run, how to do the things. We can just say, you will have oversight of these areas once, and that's where the line is drawn. Where, how they want to do it, how they want to oversee those things, we can't tell them how to do their day-to-day operations. We can just say, you will have oversight of this. And however they choose to do it is up to them. We can't tell them how to have the oversight.
So KW is a contractor.
So, yeah, right.
They don't own the assets, okay? It's the CDD that owns the assets, that has the dog in the hunt, that should be responsible for the assets.
So the way that it works right now, the O&M agreement is between the district and PPCA has delegated the day-to-day operation oversight to KW, their management company. But we don't tell them that you delegate it or you don't delegate it or who to delegate it to. We don't have that control. We just have the agreement saying we're giving you oversight of the stuff, and then however they choose to do it is up to them.
So how would that change if we did this option one?
That wouldn't change. It would be, the agreement would be between us and the PPCA, and then the scope of what the oversight is would be what we would need to review in the O&M agreement. So depending on what happens here, since all of the security, ponds, landscape would all go back under PPCA, we would have to revise the O&M agreement to include all of that as part of the scope of the things that they would oversee. But again, we can't tell them how to do it. We can't say you have to have subcommittees. We can't say you have to have this. We can't tell them you have to have KW do it. We can't say it has to be Jen. You have to contact this person. We can't tell them that. We can just say, we're giving you the authority to oversee the landscape ponds and the safety and security, the roads, the lights. And that's where our authority ends. And that you can have a threshold of X dollars before you need to contact us for approval. That's it.
So let me, I just like to review again to see whether I understand. Suppose the landscape committee comes up with a project. It, and they were a PPCA committee. They would, they could recommend that to the PPAC.
Are you gonna keep PPAC?
Well, this,
In the first option.
this option would say keep PPAC.
Well, I guess that would be up to what PPCA decides to do, because the committees actually report to PPCA. So if I'm understanding, the O&M agreement would just give oversight of the landscape stuff. So technically, if it's under $10,000, they wouldn't even have to come to you. They could just go to Jen and she can make it happen. So you would never see it
But if it were over
as
ten,
PPAC.
if it were over $10,000,
Then it would come to PPAC.
it would come to PPAC.
So you would lose a lot of the oversight of the projects. There'd be a lot of things going on in the background that you would never, they would never come before you.
Well, when you say that, but right now, we don't have oversight of those either. do we?
But the subcommittees report to you. So you're still seeing that stuff. It's coming in under your budget. You're getting monthly financials. You're seeing it's very transparent. That will go away. There will be one line on the budget that says HOA agreement and the dollars will all come out of that. You won't see any detail.
So, Laura, just to summarize it here, if we went with option one, basically it throws the committees over to PPCA to do their work. It does not really affect the budget that much. I mean, the money still stays with the district. And the PPCA, if it's under $10,000, they can go out there and do those projects. Over 10,000 comes to us, and we then recommend it to the district. And so this group stays in place. We no longer have these subcommittees, and the money doesn't change. And so basically that's it.
I wouldn't say that the money doesn't change. I would say that the total dollar amount of your budget would not change, but the detail will go away 100%.
And will be correct in understanding that then whoever the O&M agreement is with would then work with the subcommittees to create the budget.
Yes.
And then that budget would get reflected up to you and or we would get a look at it or.
Yeah, what'll happen is when those monthly reimbursement requests come in, like I put in your packets now for your meetings, that's the only time you would see any of that stuff. It would already be done.
But I mean, like when we're setting the full budget for the year.
According to the current O&M agreement, which I assume would stay the same, it is up to PPCA to actually present the budget for the next year to us, which they then delegated to Jen, and she would be putting the budget together.
And then she would direct it to you, so there wouldn't really be any input from us, is that?
I think in the past, when it came from the part of the budget that came from Castle, it did come to PPAC first, though, for you guys to have input, because it is still your community. So I would prefer that we have that additional step if we keep it that way, that Jen would present it, she would give it to me, and I would present it to you like we are now, same with the subcommittees when they come in. But again, you're only going to see $1 amount in your budget. You're not going to see the detail in the financials from the district. You'll just get the copies of the invoices when the reimbursement requests come in each month, and then put that detail in your packs.
But couldn't the budget that's put together by Jen have all the lines,
We don't do that bookkeeping on the district side. It comes out of one line. So if you want the detail, it would need to come from Jen.
This is just for the committee here, but in my estimation, it's only in my estimation that whether you're on the PPCA or if you're on the PPAC, you know, what we're looking for, what the objective is to make things work more efficiently, more effectively, and what's best for the community, no matter which one you're on. And so I think that's what we need to take a look at. And I guess we really need to evaluate these things very closely because, you know, without a trial run to figure out if it's going to work or not, we don't know. So
Looking at Stony Brook as our trial run is very encouraging, to tell you honestly.
Yeah.
are there things happening at Stony Brook that
I will just make a comment that I don't think that Stony Brook had the they're not as organized as you guys are. You already have all these committees in place and you're already running with things the way they are. Or they were not at all. And their committee does not work together as well as you guys do. They don't communicate very well between themselves. So it makes things difficult when everybody's not on the same page. So that's fair. I'll just leave it at that.
So do we see anything else within option one that we really need to explore before we go on to option two?
Well, I think one of the things that comes up is one of the reasons you would go for option one is if you thought that you could not eliminate, but certainly reduce some of the sunshine law requirements so that the committees could operate in a more collaborative way.
And that's.
And so it seems to me that we might have to reject what Tony has said and
Well, I feel like we would need to have a memorandum or whatever from BPCA's attorney
yes.
that would state how they view things.
Mhm.
Can I chime in real quick? I believe you have some representative, this is your guys' meeting, let me just be clear. And although there's no public comment on the agenda, if there is a representative of the community association there, I would encourage you to ask them to come up since they did the majority of the work on this document and maybe get their 2 cents as that was the intent of this workshop, is to discuss these different options.
Well, okay, then all of a sudden that changes the aspect of this meeting. Very favorably from my perspective, is that we can ask someone to come up and make comments. Is that right?
Hey, Chelsea, this is Doug, Zanter. I think it'd be worthwhile to have someone from us that's lived in this subcommittee / the ponds group before the subcommittee for 10 years, what their opinion is.
Yeah.
And no one, people are saying what I think, but I have an opinion.
I would also suggest that we ought to have a statement from the PPCA about this and where they see this thing going. I'd like to ask that if we're allowed to request input, I'd like to request that Faye come up and present the position of the PPCA with regard to this.
I think that's appropriate to ask Faye, not that I'm doubting Doug, but I would think it's appropriate to have Faye come up and give her 2 cents on behalf of the community association. As a representative, she is the president.
Yeah. Okay. And then well, I would suggest we at least start that way.
That's why I asked earlier, how do the subcommittees feel? What's their opinion?
Well, I would suggest we start with,
I think.
Marty, I suggest we start with the PPCA's input and then ask one of the subcommittees where they stand. I would like us to invite Laura, I guess you're still running the meeting. I don't know whether Randy takes over. Can you invite Faye up to make a comment?
You want, come on up.
Okay. Thank you.
Is it just announce who you are?
Okay. Faye Formoso, from Pelican Preserve Community Association.
Make sure you speak up because the microphone's.
Oh, I'm not in this.
Yeah, this one
Okay.
isn't.
Right, okay.
You're fine, just talk. It picks up very well. Just make sure you speak up.
Okay, all right. So I did prepare some remarks because I thought that I was going to present. So there's been a lot of good discussion here for sure. And so I'll just start with what I have prepared and then I can answer any other questions. So first and foremost, Pelican Preserve Community Association recognizes the value that PPAC and the working groups bring to the community, right? All the good work that they do. The volunteers expend a lot of their time and expertise in benefiting Pelican Preserve. So the purpose for the conversations that we've been having around the different options and things we might be able to do was to bring as much flexibility and efficiencies to the working groups that we could, right? So we were saying, is there something that we can do, the association, to help with that? We know that they're challenged because of the sunshine laws.
So we wanted to see if we could do something that made them a bit more collaborative and effective. We want our volunteers to be able to do the work that they need to do with ease and efficiency. That's really the bottom line. So although there were 4 options that we put together and worked through, the one that stood out for us, quite frankly, as being the optimal one, was the one where PPAC stays intact and the working groups transition over to Pelican Reserve Community Association. They would transition over as board sanctioned committees, right? And they would operate just like our other committees operate today. The one I'd probably equate them the most to, I think, would be the Bulk Services Committee, because our Bulk Services Committee oversees the contract that we have with Hotwire. So there's a little bit of similarities there. I've had conversations, Nancy and I, with our attorney, Steve Adamczyk. Steve Adamczyk feels that there is no issue with them operating as our committees and that they wouldn't be subject to the sunshine laws. However, right, it's not all that clean. The devil's in the details. So they would be able to oversee the contracts and the work, the vendors' work and things of that nature. Where we have to work through the process would be that they would not have the authority to contract any additional work. So they wouldn't be able to go to a vendor and say, we want to, I'll say in the landscaping space, we want to add 10 trees, you know, to Pelican Reserve Boulevard or whatever. Give us the cost, sign off on it and go. They would not be able to do that. They would have to make that recommendation to the PPCA, who would then make the recommendation to PPAC. So the way we see this is that PPAC stays intact. They do what they do today, adding the value, making sure that there's, you know, checks and balances, right, for this GSCDD, keep that transparency, et cetera. So when we speak about the O&M agreement, my view is that we build in whatever we think needs to be built into that O&M agreement, right? And then lastly on that, we understand that the GSCDD would like to make some broader changes to the O&M agreement as a whole, right? So we've started some of those conversations as to what life might look like in the future. And this is kind of an iterative step, if you will, to broader changes. And it gives us kind of the opportunity to test the waters, but then also spend the time that we should be spending having the conversations that we should be having for what the future state should look like. Making sure that, you know, we do it collaboratively, we do it cooperatively, that we clearly define roles and responsibilities amongst everyone, that we understand the impacts to budgets, risks, et cetera, all of those things. So I think if we were to start those discussions later this year, it gives us a good runway for what might happen next year. So. Any questions?
I have no questions.
Well, you know, what this says to me is that option 1 looks like a good option. We just have to figure out how to make it work.
Well, can we now step down a level and maybe have Doug come up and talk about from a subcommittee standpoint? What perspective would be there?
Can you speak as a subcommittee member and not as a resident or being Doug James?
Yeah, I could speak as a subcommittee member.
Okay.
He
As
needs
the head,
hold on, Doug, real quick. We need to make sure he's speaking on behalf of the subcommittee as a whole.
I can speak on the behalf of the subcommittee as a whole.
Okay. Thanks, Doug.
Not that I don't value your personal opinion.
In my personal opinion, I wouldn't be on the subcommittee. My opinion
Make sure you
is,
state your name.
my name is Doug Zanner. I'm the head of the Ponds and Conservation Area Subcommittee, which reports to PPAC today. I'll just start with that I have no issue in dealing with underneath PPAC and with the Sunshine Law. We might be a little unique in the Ponds group because we also have volunteers. So besides my subcommittee, I also have 32 volunteers. So like when you go out to do a research or something out there, a survey, I take 5 of my volunteers with a board member. So we only go with 1 board member. So we can do things maybe because of our size. But I go back and say, I've never had a problem getting a budget through what I needed to get done. Never had a problem in getting something approved by CDD. And we've done a good job of managing reserves. And there's so many unknowns in every one of those areas with option one. How will the budget be done? If it would all be lumped together when it goes to PPCA as part of the O&M agreement, how will all that work? There's no detail anywhere on that. I can live within the current arrangement with Sunshine. Do I get upset? I'll use a better word than I usually would use. Do I get upset when I get my hand slapped that I ask another board member who are going to attend the meeting? At that instant of time when they say it violates Sunshine, right at that instant, I'd say, yeah, let's go to a different option. But then I calm down and it's just an irritant. There's nothing that has got in my way of getting work done quickly with it because of Sunshine.
I'm not quite understanding the structure, and maybe you can, you're saying that, how many people do you have on your committee?
I have 7.
7. And then you have 30-some volunteers.
32 volunteers that help out with us as volunteers.
All right, but if you were to go to one of those 7, you can't really talk to them because of the Sunshine.
Right,
But
unless it's at a meeting.
yeah, unless it's at a meeting. But if you bring a volunteer in, you can.
Yeah,
So why don't
just like I can talk to Peggy.
can't you make them all volunteers?
Well, you need a committee. I could have 5 people in the committee, but I can talk to Peggy right now anytime we want. That doesn't violate Sunshine. I just talk to my 7 members of my committee.
And typically members of the committee are those people that are most keenly.
And they're the ones that vote, and the committee votes on things.
So am I right? You're saying we ought to just leave everything like it is?
That's what I vote for.
So it sounds like to make everything more efficient, you might want to bring your committee membership down to 3.
Well, no, I think you need a logical, it depends on how many volunteers you can get into the group. I'm always looking, I went from a complaint today, a person was complaining about irrigation. And I said, well, that's a great person to bring in as a volunteer. You always try to expand that group with knowledge within the community. And I think the problem is sometimes we get these committees, we try to keep them at 7. And when we did this, my number one concern when we went to a subcommittee is not feeling that the other 32 people were worthless because they weren't selected to be on the committee. You have to keep these people knowing they have a place and can help get the job done. You can't say you're not on the committee, we reject you.
You can say they were substitute.
Yeah. 32 substitute.
If you have 3 people on your board, okay, and you can make 4 other people substitutes, when somebody else can't attend, you can send a substitute.
Yeah, but the one thing I will say about this thing here, I know I've taken too much time, but I still think we need the O&M agreement if we're all part of PPAP. I still think we need an O&M agreement. Jennifer gets how many calls a day? Do you come to me and say this person's complaining about this is broken, stuff like that? We still need a working relationship. And her time is valuable. We have to pay her for that type of stuff. So I still think that thing that says it eliminates the O&M agreement, doesn't that say that somewhere there?
Under option 2.
Yeah, under option 2. See, I still think you're going to need it.
Well, as long as they have irrigation underneath it.
Now, that might have been a personal opinion, that last comment, but
I'd like to ask Randy from the perspective of the safety and security work group. Do you think the current thing is working okay for your observation for the safety and security?
First of all, let me apologize for being late.
Oh, Randy,
2 o'clock on my schedule.
Yeah, those microphones aren't working. The one we're using is actually up on the table. So just make sure you use your outside voice and you'll be fine.
Thanks, Joe. Okay. I was at a safety and security meeting this morning. We had 4 people on that committee, only two were in attendance, so we once again didn't have a quorum. Our chairman is here 3 months of the year. He actually is in Pelican Preserve. To begin with, I asked if he was going to have part of the reporting structure talked about, and he declined that. So there's been no discussion as to their particular feeling about it. But Dean is well aware of this structure. So my feeling is that they're not inclined to want to have a change. My personal opinion is that should the subcommittees collectively want to report to PPAC, that then the following option is for PPAC to dissolve, because there's no meaningful work for us to do.
We mean PPCA, not PPAC.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. If the subcommittees start reporting to the community association, then there's no point in PPAC existing, because you can certainly, because once you approve a project and you say it's going to be $30,000, you come to us and say, we need $30,000 in the budget. Well, you can go to the board of supervisors for that. And Laura takes care of our reporting on finances now. So she could certainly suggest what line item that should go to.
Well, it wouldn't, it would only go all on one line, although all the accounting would be handled by KW if you go under PPCA. The only thing I would do is look at, there'd be one line and you would pay out of, you would see no detail on the district's financials.
But what would there be for us to do? We'd be there, if in terms of the safety and security, they suggest if it goes to that point, and they only have an input, a menial input, like or making sure that toilet paper and cleaning supplies are in the gatehouse, they're not on board with that.
Laura, if we decided on option 2, that is leave everything as it is.
Mhm.
I guess I'm asking Laura and Chelsea, what would we have to do now? What changes are there changes we would need to make now?
We still, either way, the O&M agreement either needs to be rewritten or it could possibly go away. We have an option if all that's gonna be left underneath the O&M agreement would be irrigation. We can just internally transfer those funds. That's how we handle it at Stony Brook and some of the other areas. It's just a journal entry. There aren't any actual bills that would have to get paid. And then any of the irrigation stuff would just get handled by the landscape committee. So basically the O&M agreement will go away because between staff and the subcommittees, everything over there would have oversight. And if there's any issues, they would just have to contact the district.
Is that how we're operating now?
No. The way it works now is that, Jen and, Jen. Jen handles everything because she's the boots on the ground person over there. She does work with staff here for larger projects and she gets input from us and, we are taking care of, the larger expense items. Will either just say, sometimes they're small tasks, but they're expensive. And so we'll be like, yeah, just go ahead and take care of it and sign off on it and Jen will handle it. It may be more than $10,000 or more than $5,000. We'll just be like, just take care of it. Like the light post is like $17,000. It's one light post. So we're like, just take care of it. So, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth. We chat probably 2-3 times a week, especially lately. She has direct access to Andrew, our public works director. Some of our maintenance staff, if they need to go over there, is on call to go over and take care of things if they need help. So it's a really good working relationship right now. But with the shifts, the way that they're proposed in the budget at this point is all of the safety and security stuff would also fall under our budget. So really the only thing that would be left is irrigation. And we could take that away as well. And then there would be really nothing left.
So it needs to be a significant savings in monies not paying KW.
93, nothing. Yeah, we pay the CPC. It's about $93,000 a year. Yeah.
Well, to be clear, the board has opted to place a maintenance worker dedicated solely to Pelican in the budget. So it wouldn't necessarily reduce a total of 93,000. The admin fee, which is what we're being charged from the community association,
Go down.
that would go away if the O&M agreement went away. So then you could choose to utilize that 93,000, which I believe, which was the intent of bringing that maintenance person on board. That would help take on some of the boots on the ground, physical labor and be a liaison for some of these subcommittees.
That person would be they would be dedicated to Pelican Preserve. They would be a gateway employee. Yes, they would like check in here, but their day would be spent there. So they would be dedicated to Pelican.
So then any, invoices that come through would come from our subcommittee chairs to you. Is that a correct statement?
The vendors would send them to us direct.
The vendors would send them.
Yes, but we would get approval for any of the projects from the subcommittees and then PPAC if they're larger.
Okay.
So it'd be the same way we're doing it now.
And this, as a maintenance person, is this a different individual than the one that was, you know, that we had with, Castle Group?
That's a Pelican, they're hired,
Was that a different employee?
that person is not a district employee.
If we're looking at adding a brand new person.
So that person would actually work for Gateway. The person that you had before the, John, right? That's he was with Castle. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that person was not a Gateway employee. This would be a Gateway employee. They'd be on our payroll.
From your perspective, is the way it's running now okay?
From my perspective, I think so, yeah. But again, I'm not there all the time. There's still some things that we're still trying to sort out, especially even from the transition yet, but I think it can work, but I also understand the frustrations of the subcommittees with the sunshine law, but we have to keep, everything needs to stay above board. I get it. It makes it a little tedious, but I think that, I mean, they are district assets. It makes sense to me to have the district have the oversight through you and the subcommittees and then having staff on site to maintain our assets. But again, that's my opinion. It's what you guys say that's the recommendation that we'll take to the board.
What if we decided to leave it as it's now operating?
Mm-hmm.
What would we be advising the board to do? What kind of advice would we be taking to the board? Anything?
You would just tell them that you want to leave it as is, and then we would review the current O&M agreement. If we make the changes like in number 2, it would actually go away. If we pulled the irrigation, there wouldn't be anything left over there for them to pay. So your recommendation would be to dissolve the O&M agreement, and then everything would be handled at the district level. Or you could leave it, as is.
I don't think that's.
I would have to look, I know we put the person in the budget, so it would be the $93,000 that's in there now for them would go away, but we already figured the staff person in.
I was wrong. 86.
Yeah, I thought it was 96.
Yeah, well, I would say
Anyway, it's a significant number. And this, this dispute over sunshine laws all started with this attempt to save money on the O&M agreement. So
Well, I mean.
I don't quite understand how we're gonna solve it.
We were caught up and we had to mature into the organizational structure that we are now. I mean, we weren't legitimate before that in the way I understood it.
Right,
We didn't
yeah.
have.
You had
fully
PPAC and you had the
functioning-
ponds committee, and then you had other people who were, the other 2 committees were kind of out there, semi-organized, and then this officially organized them, gave them names, had them, named the committees, gave them a budget, did all of that.
And unfortunately put us under censor.
Yes,
That was.
correct.
But some of it has been sort of force fed. Just 2 meetings ago, we had a budget basically forced on safety and security to fall within 4 areas before they had a chance to talk about whether they wanted to take on these responsibilities. And I'm talking about what was normally maintenance type thing. Looking at, other than technically safety and security, pressure washing of roads, of sidewalks, the repair of roads. These are not been
Well, in Ponds,
Our-
we do painting of boardwalks and repair of boardwalks. I mean,
We do signs.
we
and
do
everything,
signs. I
too.
mean, there's a lot of maintenance that we have that bring. It's not just conceptual.
And again, you will have staff support for those items, so it's if you're not sure what to do, if you need help or whatever, it's, we're here. And you have access to that, as well as having that person, if we go that route, and having that full-time
I'm
person.
just saying, we've lost, if we go away from KW or otherwise, we've essentially given up institutional memory in terms of who are trusted vendors, approximate cost for different types of projects and things of that nature.
So we still have that. Yeah, that wouldn't go away.
Right.
Jen still works with us for vendors, so that wouldn't go away. We still have all that.
I would like to have more perspective from the community association about if we plan to just leave things as they are. Say, I'd like to hear, you seemed,
So is it okay to speak for everybody?
Can I jump in before Faye speaks?
yep,
So I want to be clear because when you say that things stay as they are, we have not updated the O&M agreement to reflect the current operating structure of the subcommittees being official underneath the district. Because in the O&M, in the exhibit, it still says that a lot of these items, like landscaping, for instance, is being overseen by the community association through the O&M. So what needs to occur is if we structurally stay as is with the subcommittees operating and answering to the community association or to PPAC, then we have to make that last, I think it's exhibit B in the O&M, that needs to get reviewed. And then we would sit down and negotiate with the community association on their admin fee for overseeing these assets. But exhibit B can be amended unilaterally without their input. So there is work to be done. It's just a matter of in which direction. And that's why we really relied on just these two options.
The O&M agreement needs to be touched regardless of what we do. It either needs to be rewritten or or go away. So it just, we don't know what changes need to be made to it until you decide which way we're gonna go.
So in terms of the subcommittees and the options that were presented, I'll just reinforce what I said before. It really was about making sure that the people that volunteer to do the work that they do every day on the subcommittees could do that work in the most effective and efficient way possible. And to see if the PPCA could in some way, shape or form, help in that regard. And we found that we could help in that regard, right? In terms of them coming over and not being subject to the sunshine laws. I personally don't see why PPAC would be irrelevant in that scenario. And I guess I'll say it this way, the same as with the O&M agreement, right? I don't think you can do away with the O&M agreement. I think there probably needs to be changes to it, modifications. When I look at something like this, though, to me, what it means is we have to sit down collaboratively and cooperatively and work through what the structure looks like, what the processes look like, what are the risks and issues, what are the impacts, and we need to be clearly aligned on what the outcome is. So I don't think that we can easily sit here now and say, this definitely changes or this should go away. I think we need to do the work to get there. And quite frankly, if the subcommittees, PPAC, the GSEDD all feel that the subcommittees are better served under PPAC, then okay, so be it. Again, our intent there was to try and simplify things and to make things easier. As well as, I know that the GSEDD again is looking to make broader changes in the future. This was an iterative way to get there and kind of test the waters. So it's, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think they need to be appropriately explored. And I think we need to understand the impacts of everything. And I don't think we should be saying that PPAC goes away or the O&M agreement goes away. I think that all needs to be worked through.
I agree, yeah, I agree. I mean, something needs to change, but we just need to figure out.
I seem to recall here, just not that many months ago, that when Castle was still here, some of these issues kept coming up about coordination between PPCA and PPAC about getting stuff done. Stuff wasn't getting done and projects weren't being taken care of. And so we were assured that Scott would work closely with the PPAC group in order to help get those things done. And that's why they were getting paid $93,000, I think, or that was part of the reason why they were getting paid $93,000. Again, in my opinion, it's to ensure that we get stuff done. Whatever position we take on these things is to get stuff done and make Pelican Reserve improved and looking nice like it should, so we can all sell our houses for an extra $20,000, $200,000. But I don't care which option we come up with. We got to keep it in mind is for the betterment of the community.
Absolutely.
And so we really got to think through this.
Seems to me at this point, we ought to continue moving toward doing the things that are already in process. I mean, there are things that are changing, right, with regard to the O&M agreement.
So you're saying basically not to make a drastic change, keep PPAC, keep the subcommittees under
Right.
PPAC, move the safety and security budget under the
Right.
district next year. And then we would work with transitioning out those final handful of things away from KW.
Exactly.
And if you look at it, I mean, and Faye talked about an iterative approach to this. I mean, this is a different way of having an iteration. Get the O&M to the point where we believe that it makes sense. And then, you know, if in the end we decide that, you know, down the road, subcommittees can work more efficiently. I mean, we can always move and readjust.
It can always be changed. And
It
that's
can always be
from our
changed.
standpoint, if that were to happen, and let's say that in August, the board approves the budget the way it's submitted, which means safety and security, each subcommittee has their own budget. If partway through the year, like what happened at Stony Brook, you decide you want to change that, I mean, then it's strictly on our side, it's a numbers game. I would just add all the stuff up that's outstanding, shove it under that one line, and then it would transition over. I mean, it's not that simple. From a accounting standpoint, it's that simple, but from the management side, it's not. So, I mean, it's not like you're locked into it until next year, if for some reason it doesn't.
It's not
go
like
as planned,
we
but-
can't readjust.
Right.
If things are not.
Right.
As Christine speaking.
One question, or maybe you and Chelsea can help out here. It's about the 1, 2, 3. It's the fourth one down about hire a maintenance person full time.
Yep.
Now, I got a few things to talk about it, but first of all, would it be a supervisory type of person or is this a worker?
It would be a worker, it would be a maintenance person.
All right, and he's gonna work with the subcommittees.
Yeah, he will be, that person, he or she, that person will be dedicated to Pelican Preserve. They'll be a gateway employee that is just Pelican, all things Pelican.
Okay, so.
And they would have resource to the rest of to Al, to Andrew, to me, to Chelsea. I mean, they're still a district employee, so they can freely communicate back and forth between the subcommittees, you guys, us, the rest of staff, you know, because they're a district employee, they have a little more latitude when it comes to talking to people.
And they can talk to.
Vendors, yep, absolutely, yep.
And so they would be the
He
Scott.
just couldn't meet with Doug and someone else from the Ponds Committee at the same time, but he could meet with each of them, and just like I can talk to Doug anytime I want, I can talk to any of you guys anytime I want, as long as it's only one at a time. They would be under the same as us, so.
So the 93,000 you paid for Scott, who was out there, he really wasn't a worker bee, he was kind of a supervisor, so to speak. That's what we're spending the money for here, to hire a maintenance person to work with the groups, basically.
Yeah, I looked, it's about, it's
They
like,
do handyman. This is.
well, that too, but they would attend the meetings, and they would be like our VAs, they would be the on the ground liaison between the district and Pelican.
It would be our job.
Yes, They would do maintenance stuff, they would attend your meetings, they would work with us to make sure projects are getting done. They would be like a lot of the stuff that Jen is doing now, where she's there and she's having contact with vendors if people are promising to come to work on the smaller projects that the district isn't overseeing. That person would have that oversight of those projects. They would be the one contacting the vendor saying, hey, you're supposed to be here 2 days ago. What's going on? That would be, they would.
So, but basically what we're saying, there isn't a money exchange here, the 93,000 will probably go away. And
I looked at what we put them in there at, it would be about $40,000 plus benefits, which puts them a little over 50, you end up saving about $40,000.
so there may be a savings there.
Yeah, about 40,000. So,
Savings for the district.
well, it'd be for you guys, because it would be less, you get assessed.
Only supervisors in the.
They would report to Andrew, our public works.
Now, this makes some sense to me, because one of the difficulties we have is tracking where we're at with projects. If any progress is being made on them, whether they're completed and paid for, because we're not getting spreadsheets as we used to give us an indication of what's done and what's still in the works. So perhaps if we have an individual that we can go to specifically for that kind of information, we can be better informed about progress that we're trying to make too.
You know, if we make the change of having everything go over to the PPCA, I think we have less transparency in our budget. And what we need is more transparency in our budget. We have a fiscal responsibility to the people that live in Pelican Preserve also. Not just making these subcommittees work more efficiently. We also have a tax liability for the people and what they pay, what they're paying to maintain their assets. I think more transparency is better.
Good point.
So what I'm hearing is that the outcome of this workshop, my feeling is the consensus is that we continue on the track we're on right now.
I concur.
Go forward with it, that we recommend to the board. That that's where we
We
go.
don't have to wait until your July meeting to make.
I understand that, to make you this officially.
Yes.
I'm saying, but I'm saying the consensus now. And then we're gonna have to make it official in our July meeting. That we will advise the CDD board that we want to revise the O&M agreement as needed to reflect the organization that is now shaping up, if you will, as it is.
Are we missing though the other subcommittees' perspectives? I mean, I know you said that Dean was not willing to give you a perspective, but can't we get a sense of how they feel it's working?
Well,
there's
I would suggest that we continue the track we're on, but then we see how it's working.
I will make sure that that there is a representative from each of the subcommittees that gets invited to your July 13th meeting, because that way they can actually come up and speak and give input, and you'll be voting on it and making decisions at that time. So, Georgia, please make sure that I remember that we invite someone from each of the subcommittees, the chair or their representative, to be here for the July 13th PPAC meeting so that they can speak on behalf of their committees.
And I would suggest that as we move through this process in the next year, those committees will be able to see how this works and what changes we may want, further changes we may want to make.
Right.
Based on what they're facing.
I encourage you to take a look at the current O&M agreement as well and come with some suggestions for what changes. I mean, staff is going to look at it based on our discussions today. That gives us an idea of kind of where to head with it. But I encourage you to look at it and bring back suggestions for changes at the.
So
the
it was it 2017 that the O&M agreement was.
It was last changed in 2020.
So that was the,
That was the year the
that
admin
was
fees
also
got put in.
attached to this document that was posted online, right?
I believe so.
I just remember that.
Yeah, there was one from 2017, and that one said that there were no admin fees that were to be charged, and then in 2020, it was revised to reflect that there would be an admin fee charge.
Reading that was cruel and unusual.
Here, so, yeah. that's-
From safety and security, a year ago, they had a line item for in the O and M agreement for $75,000.
Okay.
The new one is so I think we need to have this O and M agreement in place and working, and then determine whether these
Sure.
subcommittees can handle this.
Again, you have,
And
those
whether
are,
it makes more sense for them to go to the community association.
and then
But
with
this
those,
is a big, this is a big.
those are big projects that would the district, I mean, when you're talking about paving roads, that would be stuff that the district would be involved in, even if it went underneath the PPCA, because that's a large project, which is outside the threshold.
I think so, I
So,
understand.
anyway, it's
I
got
just-
some
I just-
resources, so.
Trying to give you some perspective of what this is looking like for a small group of volunteers.
No, I understand. And you're not even alone. So it's not like we're like, no, that's your budget. You gotta handle it all by yourself. Doug would be screwed. He's got projects that are way bigger than that. He's good. So no, we're still here, even if we, we're going anywhere.
Will we need to submit something, or can you have this be on the agenda?
This will be on the agenda. I'll just make sure it's clear.
To make sure when you advise those committee members to attend, that the expectation is that they do make a presentation.
I will ask them to put something on ahead of time, like they should have something from their, from.
I don't want to catch them off guard.
Yeah, no, I'll let them know that they're gonna be expected to speak on behalf of their subcommittee regarding the topic. So, and I know this is not related to what we're talking about now, but I wanted you to know that we submitted the document to AECom to have them come give us a quote for what it'll take to do an inspection and all of it.
Thank you very much.
You can retire now, Marty.
Bridger, that's his.
I've been doing my research, so,
Yeah.
and roadway bridges, according to the Florida Department of Transportation, are required to be inspected annually.
I think there was like, so there were 57 pages of stuff that we.
Bridger.
I call him Bridger, that's my name from.
Shuffle.
That's why it's a movement to be on the other side of the bridge.
If I'm understanding, at least from a staff perspective, the way that we'll work on then just assuming that we're going to go with option 2 at this point. And keep things as they are and modify the O&M agreement for you. Okay.
You know,
I am considering a formal decision, but based on.
I sense that's the consensus of the people who are here on the committee.
Can you send out the O and M agreement and something that can be handed in?
Yes. Yeah, we can send it out in the Word document with. Somebody go. All right, I think that's it.
I moved.
You don't have to move, we're not official. So, 2:23, we'll call for, we'll call, we'll adjourn. Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thanks, Chelsea.